Hey guys, welcome into the KC Sports Authority podcast. This is your host, Keegan Russell. With me again today, I've got Spencer Gray and John Merker, JB, down there. We've got a lot to cover. It's been a crazy last 2 weeks in NCAA basketball, so we're going to try and get to as much of it as possible today. Obviously, starting with KU losing in the tournament last weekend. Pretty depressing. That was a frustrating game to watch. We don't really want to spend too much time talking about it. KU ended up losing to Arkansas, which was probably for the best because this weekend UConn boat raced Arkansas and it was not even close. So I don't know how that game would have gone. There's a lot we could talk about, not having Bill Self, guys getting in foul trouble early and just kind of changed the whole way the game went. But KU did fall. That means their season is coming to an end. And that is the focal point of today's episode, is talk about some of the offseason stuff, get into the transfer portal. There's several guys that have already announced they're leaving this week in the transfer portal. Talk about the incoming class and all that. So we're going to kind of get into it. But first off, don't forget, you can find our podcast over on YouTube and over on Spotify. Just search for KC Sports Authority. You can also hit us up on Twitter at KCSA Pod or over on Facebook at KC Sports Authority. All right, fellas, let's get into it. So KU loses to Arkansas. No Bill Self. Lots of foul trouble late in the second half. KU had the lead all the way up until the last 2 minutes of the game and all fell apart. All I want from you guys is your major takeaway from that game. Let's start with Spencer.
Oh, man. Yeah. Well, we kind of talked about how fragile the line is between this team being elite and this team kind of falling short. And one of those points is Grady Dick getting involved. And Grady finished with 7 points and 7 rebounds. And so it just kind of goes to show you, when they take him out of the game, spacing for everyone gets really tight. So that affects DeJuan's ability to drive to the bucket and either score or throw up a lob. It affects Jalen's ability to get to the bucket, McCullough's ability to slash. And I think that's just kind of what we saw. Play calling, I think Norm overall did an outstanding job stepping in for Bill, but there was a couple of interesting play calls there down the stretch, particularly the last possession. If you're going to go for a 2, you got to go for it right away. You can't run off half the clock and then, play the foul game with 8 seconds left. So a couple things that could have gone better. Officiating was atrocious, and I mean that on both sides. I think there were fouls called on both sides that just didn't make any sense. So overall, really frustrating way to end. But, I think we kind of, even though our bracket picked KU to win, we did talk about the potential of them losing early on. So it's not too much of a shock.
Yeah, I 100% agree with everything Spencer said. It's, a lot of the times whenever someone loses, right, what is the first thing people like to blame? It's the refs. And as much as I would like to blame the refs, I can't this time. I really can't. I can blame them in the sense that they did call a lot of crazy calls. I thought the moving screens on Ernest were really ridiculous. I mean, to have both of our bigs with 4 fouls each was rough for a majority of that game. My issue is really because the refs, as Spencer said, they were calling them on both sides. My issue really is just this loss just felt so uncharacteristic of our team this year, because it wasn't like some giant 20-point blowout loss at Texas, and it wasn't some blowout loss at TCU. I feel like when we lose games, we kind of lose by a lot. I mean, K-State was a close loss, kind of. It's just, I feel like more often than not, our losses this season were ones that we just were never in really throughout the entire game. But we had control of that game. I believe the statistic was 26-0 when leading at half this season. So to think all that fell apart was just wild to me. This team I know was not as good as our national championship team. So all in all, I can't be too disappointed, but I will say it was the ending was quite comical. I think accidentally making that free throw was a little comical, and it kind of made everyone freeze up. We were like, oh crap, that wasn't supposed to happen. And there was still 3 seconds on the clock. We could have maybe gotten a quick foul or steal, put up a shot, got fouled, and made free throws to win. I mean, Dewan was frozen right there. It was frustrating in those final seconds just because, well, hey, there's still like just a smidge, but a little bit amount of time to maybe win this. That that game was tough. I think I can forgive the team, but what I can't forgive is Musselman taking his shirt off and getting on a table and swinging his shirt around after the game. Arkansas's coach apparently does this all the time.
Well, that definitely came back to bite him. Getting stuck yesterday helped.
I've never seen anything so like egregious, so classless, so unprofessional. Could you imagine Bill Self doing that? I don't like. Of course, we are in the position of being the top dog most of the time, but that's just something I've never seen. Storm the court, fine, but like taking your shirt off as an adult male, that kind of got me. I thought it was really disrespectful, and you can celebrate the win with class, and I don't think that was done. But for their sake, I actually had hoped that they would have beaten UConn just to validate the loss a little bit more. Them getting smacked pretty hard was a little bittersweet for me. It's tough, but then we just kind of have to move on to next year. But it was a tough game.
Yep. I think you guys summed it up pretty well. My biggest takeaway, I think, definitely not having Coach hurt, which, again, we're not going to get into should he have coached, all that. Health is number one concern there, obviously. I think any KU fan would trade longer-term coaching from Bill Self than for one game, especially given the way the field broke out for us, that they're even with Bill Self, this was going to be a tough tournament stretch. But Spencer, like you said, I think Norm actually did pretty well. There are a few things here and there where you can tell, Self is more superior at play calling, that kind of stuff. I actually didn't mind the play they drew up at the end, other than the fact that it took way too long to get into. But just the way the refs were calling the game, I was like, well, should we rather take an open three that we're not hitting, or force a three that we're not hitting, or let Jalen drive? Hopefully he scores and gets the and one. And I actually liked that. And he was close. I mean, that ball was probably like 3 inches higher off the glass and it goes in and he gets the and one. But yeah, how funny and ironic is it that when we need to miss a free throw, we make it. When we need to make the free throws, we miss 2 front ends of a 1-and-1. But yeah, uncharacteristic down the stretch, I think, for KU. I think all of our weaknesses really showed there in the last 5-6 minutes. Free throw shooting being one of them. Poor rebounding from the big guys. Arkansas got that stupid rebound off of a missed free throw, and that really just took the control of the game right back over to him when Yes Food missed the block out. And of course, Dewan's very uncharacteristic 10-second call, which as I was watching that play, I thought the clock went fast. And now obviously it went at a normal time. But I'm sitting there watching and going, all right, guys, there's 26 seconds. Let's go. Okay, there's 23 seconds. Okay, you're still 10 feet.
That 10-second call was the biggest gut punch in KU basketball since Northern Iowa was 3. That was so bad.
That sucked, and I felt like they took too long. But I mean, honestly, watching, I'm like, man, the clock is going fast. He needs to move. But you get the 10-second call. You have a 5-second call on an inbounds play. You get the 3 phantom moving screens with Uday. Now some of them, I could see it was just an odd game. I think at the end of it, you saw KU was outworked. The other team was more physical, more athletic. They did the little things. KU, obviously, their lack of bench production showed up again where there was literally nothing. If Jalen only took 9 shots, somehow we still scored 71 points off of Jalen only getting 9 shots. Grady was locked up defensively. Nothing happened. So I think all that aside, the weaknesses of this team really showed in the last 6-7 minutes. What do you do when Jalen can't get a shot off? What do you do when Grady can't get a shot off? And KJ sitting on the bench with fouls. Dewan and Kevin did what they could, but you weren't getting any looks from anywhere else. And I think ultimately that's the biggest downfall of this team is just roster construction. And we'll get into that because obviously pretty much the entire bench is in the transfer portal. And some of that I think is from the coaching staff. Some of that I think is players realizing their lack of opportunity moving forward, but we'll get into that. So sadly, the season comes to an end like it does every year. It'd be nice if we were a national champion every year, but that's incredibly unlikely. So more times than not is the year going to end in disappointment. But as a whole, we're going to spend a few minutes on this. March Madness has been insane this year. I mean, we went through our podcast bracket challenge, put together our bracket, and after the first 4 games, our bracket was toast, trash, rip it up. Same with most of our personal brackets. And if anyone that's in our bracket challenge now, if you look at it, there's only like 9 people in it that have a national championship pick left, which is crazy. All of the heavy favorites have lost for the most part. First time in NCAA history that there's not a 1 seed in the Elite 8 matchups. That's never happened in the history of the tournament. So it's been a crazy tournament. We've seen some insane games. Farley Dickinson upset. FAU's on an incredible run right now. Princeton made it to the Sweet 16. Just a lot of fun, exciting games. I think the Thursday night's games this weekend for the Sweet 16 matchups were incredible. Our little brother K-State is having a tremendous tourney run, which we're going to talk about a little bit because we have to. It's impressive what they're doing. Albeit, they haven't had the toughest route of teams, but the way they are playing like a legit contender. So we'll talk about that. So I just want to get some thoughts from you guys. What have you seen so far in this tournament? What games have stood out the most to you? Just kind of give me your thoughts on the madness we've seen the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, I'll start us off there. I think now I put up a Twitter poll yesterday. I'll have to check and look at what the scores are right now. But my poll is basically asking, is this the year that we've had the most madness ever? Or is there another option? I don't know what that other option would be because we've experienced a 16 beating a 1 for only the second time in history. A 15 seed, Princeton, going to the Sweet 16. No 1 seeds going on to the Elite 8 for the first time ever. And while I think there were some upsets that were, for the most part, not predicted, I did pick Furman. I was happy about that. And then I don't know, other games didn't go my way. I had Drake going to the Sweet 16. There is a lot wrong with my bracket. But I will point out no 5-12 upsets. So in the sense of like madness, it doesn't make sense. Like, oh yeah, it wasn't that mad because 5 and 12s, all the 5 seeds moved on in the first round. Well, I think it's madness that all 5 seeds moved on. We always talk about the 5-12 upsets. You got to put 2 of them in your bracket. I think everybody had at least 2 of them in their brackets, and we didn't have that. So it was a crazy tournament. I loved watching Fairleigh Dickinson beating Purdue. I loved it. I didn't care that I wanted to go against the grain and put Purdue all the way up to the Elite 8, I believe, because everyone was picking Memphis to beat them, and I was trying to play the big brain play and just give Purdue the benefit of the doubt, and I just ended up looking like a moron. There were a ton of good games, and K-State, of course, was putting on a show. So it's just it's been a year of heartbreak for KU fans, but also it's been a pretty maddening year, I guess. I'm all for it because this is the best time of the year. Wins and losses aside, this tournament is the best thing in sports to me. So I'm fairly pleased with this year. I'm more confused about what I'm going to do next year with my bracket and how I'm going to approach those matchups. Should I just flip a coin? Because I'm thinking, everyone's up for grabs, really.
Spencer, let me ask you this real quick before you give me your thoughts, because this has been a lot of talk on a lot of sports stations last few weeks, and especially here locally. CDOT has been talking a lot about this on 610. Spencer, do you think the just the way the league has changed the last 10 years with the advancement of the three-point shot, the transfer portal, just talent in general, do you think the gap from number 1 to 64 has shrunk enough that even though we're still seeing these what I would still say major upsets, that the opportunity for these lesser teams to pull off the upset, do you think that just that gap has shrunk enough? Is it better coaching? Is it luck, a chance at the three? Because when I'm sitting here watching these games, I'm looking at that Farley Dickinson Purdue game, and Edie still scored close to 20, but FDU controlled that game from start to finish. They were aggressive on defense. Obviously, they hit open shots, but they had this just such desire and will to win, even though they're completely undersized. And a lot of people are saying that maybe the talent gap, talent level overall has increased so much that even these small schools can get good players, even if they don't have the money for NIL. But there's only so many spots open. Do you think the talent gap has shrunk enough from big schools to little schools, and that's why we're seeing more of these teams, or is there something else going on?
Well, I think it's a combination of things. One, I think the seeding this year just really sucked. I think the selection committee, I mean, we talked about it with KU. I think they just did not do a good job. As far as the talent, yeah, I think talent's a little bit more spread out now. I think AAU pipelines are so popular that you're getting, homegrown talent a lot. You're getting guys that don't necessarily want to go to the big commercial school. They, want to go for other reasons. I think personally, March Madness has always been about matchups. I think even if seeding is a made up thing, like obviously there's statistics and facts to back it up. There's reasons why people do this, but a team that is built to beat another team, doesn't matter what the seeds are. FDU could have been a 12th seed, a 13th seed, whatever the case may be. And they just matched up really well against Purdue. So I think it's all about matchups. I think, and if a team matches up well against a number 1 seed, I think they can beat them anytime, any day. And outside of that, I also think that March Madness, one of the reasons why we see so many upsets is because it's not about like a 7-game series each game. You can catch a team on an off night, and there's particular factors that if you're not connecting on those, if you're not firing on those, you're going to lose no matter how good you are. The best team in the tournament could have a bad day from 3, bad day from the free throw line, have their best player foul out, and then they lose. And so I think,
night.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think whoever wins this tournament's the best team in the country. I don't think so at all. I think it's the hottest team in the country. I think it's the team that is, figuring stuff out at the right time. But to the overall point of if talent has increased, I mean, I definitely think it has. I think basketball, it just is filled with more talent now than it really ever has been. But I do think there's a lot of factors that contribute to a year like this. And the selection committee needs to be gutted. Everyone needs to be fired, replace them all, because this was just not a good year for them.
Yeah, Florida Atlantic as a 9 seed.
Yeah,
they look like a 4 seed. Texas looks like they should be the number 1 overall seed. UConn way better than a 4 seed.
Houston should not have been a 1 seed,
especially not in the Midwest.
We knew. Yeah, Houston should not have been a 1 seed. Purdue should not have been a 1 seed. They were so inconsistent. The Big Ten is not a good league. Tom Izzo can get on whatever interview he wants and say the Big Ten's the best league in the way, whatever he wants to do, but they're not. They're a bad team. Indiana, who should have overperformed in March, was not good. I mean, come on, there's just so many factors. That's why I love March Madness. And I agree with John. I think this is like the craziest one ever. The only one that comes close to mind was the UConn Kentucky year, because I think UConn was like a 9th seed. I think Kentucky was like a 7th seed or something. Neither of those teams anyone had going to the finals, but this is definitely up there for sure.
Yeah, it's been fun, and as we sit right now, it's Saturday morning of Elite 8 weekend, so I don't really want to throw out too many predictions because by the time I have this edited and posted, who knows who wins or loses later today. But up until this point, just a quick few teams I wanted to shout out here. Texas, UConn, and K-State look like they are the 3 best teams in the tournament. K-State looks like they have the best coach and the best player right now, Marquise Noel. It would be a crime for Jerome Tang not to win National Coach of the Year, especially just given the full circumstance of where that program was before he got there. Rodney Terry at Texas is also doing an incredible job. They were able to pull off a big win after losing Dylan DeSue in the first minute of the game, and they had 5 guys go off, for double figures, and they look unstoppable. UConn boat races Arkansas, who's probably the most athletically gifted team in the league, and that made zero impact on the game. UConn just controlled that start to finish. There's a lot of good basketball left, especially this weekend. But I think what's crazy thinking about the Final Four national championship is you're going to have a 3 seed or lower in the national championship game. And that's not that common. And you're probably going to have, even if UConn wins and makes the Final Four, they're a very underrated 4 seed. They're probably a 1 or 2. But that left side of the bracket, you're talking about a potential 9 seed being the national championship, a 4 seed. It's just a lot of madness, and it's fun to look forward to. So I don't want to throw out any predictions on here right now. Maybe we'll do some for the Final Four, because I'm sure whatever we say today, it's going to go the opposite here in like 6 hours. So
I don't think we should make any more predictions for the rest of our lives after picking Memphis to go to the Final Four, because I've never screamed so much at a game that KU wasn't playing at.
Oh my gosh, that game
was bad.
Memphis should have won. The refs were awful, but Kendrick Davis threw that ball away when there was no reason to do it. And as soon as that left his hand, I was like, "Yep, I went the game." that was my team for the whole tournament, and so that destroyed my bracket. And then of course we talked about picking Furman over Virginia, and we ended up going Virginia. So we lost the first game of the tournament. If you lose the first game of the tournament, your bracket's done for.
Every year, like clockwork, I lose the first game of the tournament. I couldn't believe West Virginia lost that game against Maryland. I couldn't believe. That was
frustrating too.
That was extremely frustrating and made the Big 12 look really bad. And I think I tweeted out like, Furman redeems me, because Furman came through. I started to look real smart. I had Florida Atlantic beating Memphis because I knew everyone was high on Memphis, and like kind of jumping back to my big brain play, that was my logic behind putting Purdue really far was, well, if Memphis isn't there to stop them, I think Purdue can go really far. That was my big brain play that just blew up in my face. But yeah, I mean, shortly after that, like I said earlier, it blew up.
But hey, that's what the tournament's for. Your bracket should get busted every year, because that means it's fun and exciting. So a lot more to look forward to there, but we're not going to throw out any more predictions. All right, let's get to the meat of today, the main purpose. And for those of you listening or watching later, I'll post in the description of the link. If you don't want to hear our first half of this talking about the tournament, that's fine. I'll put in there where to jump to if you want to hear just about the KU basketball roster. So let's get into that, because that is what today's episode is about. Lots of changes. This team had 13 scholarship players, and now they are projected to lose at least 7 of those 13. Obviously, Grady, Jalen, and Kevin to the NBA draft. There's still speculation Grady could potentially come back. I think that's highly unlikely, unless he just is not getting good feedback from draft guys. But he's built for the NBA. Yes, his defense is a struggle, but nobody plays defense in the NBA, so they don't care. They always say they care, but in reality, they're not. Grady is not going to be in the league because of defense. He's going to be in the league because he's a scoring threat from the wing, can be plugged into a big lineup as an athletic guard. So not too concerned there. If he does come back, that'd be great, because he would be the guy, and that would be filling a tremendous hole this roster has. So you got those 3. Obviously, losing Jalen is huge. Technically, Jalen and Kevin could both come back still because of that COVID year. I don't think that's going to happen at all. Maybe with Kevin. He's kind of all over the place between early second round to undrafted. So maybe, if he goes through the draft process and he just doesn't get a lot of good feedback, I could see that potentially, or if he gets an injury between now and the combine, something like that. But those 3 are more than likely gone. And then you've got the rest of the bench players. So right now, your only starters returning for sure are DeJuan and KJ. No question there that those 2 guys are back, and they are the centerfold of the team now. But we've seen Bobby Pettiford enter the transfer portal. Joe Yesufu, our guy Cam Martin, unfortunately. We've already seen Zach Clements enter the portal. So you got 4 guys right there right away with still waiting word on guys like Kyle Cuff and MJ Rice and even maybe Zuby. So the roster is basically gutted. I think initial thought as a KU fan is, oh my gosh, what's happening? That's a lot of guys walking out the door. And I totally understand that. I will be the first to tell you, I think all of those departures actually make the team better. Most of those guys with this current roster setup, I don't think are the best fit for what we're doing. And they didn't show anything this last year to 2 years that what they provide is significant impact. I think especially Yesufu's case of all of them to me, I thought halfway back in the season that, all right, he needs to leave after this year. Not because he's a bad player. He is not built for the type of team we need because he's so undersized. You can't throw DeJuan out there who's not a great shooter, can if he needs to, but isn't looking to score, and then put an undersized 2 guard next to him who can't guard 6'5", 6'6", 6'7" wing players, is a streaky shooter at best. Like, Joe needs to be in a primary ball handler role, even if he's not the primary ball handler, like, if that makes sense. Like, he needs to be the point guard as a scoring option, and that's just not going to happen here at KU. Same thing with Bobby Pettiford. Bobby Pettiford, undersized guard. I think he had a great potential to do what Bill Self's talked about, but DeJuan's here another 2 years. DeJuan's in the starting lineup. You're not putting another undersized guard next to him. So Bobby would have to literally wait more and more. And the significance DeJuan has on this team, he's going to get himself 35, 36 minutes a night. So you're talking about 4 to 5 minutes a night at the true point guard position for a bench player. And 1, that's not worth Bobby's time to sit around and wait for. But 2, again, he's an undersized guard for what I think KU needs, given the fact that DeJuan's here. So those 2 I'm not concerned with. I know a lot of fans loved Bobby and was hoping he'd be the next Frank Mason. And I think had DeJuan Harris been graduating this year, we might see that happen. So best of luck to those 2. Hope they find a better fit somewhere else. Cam Martin, no surprise there. That guy had the most unfortunate luck here in his time at KU. When he came in last year as a transfer, obviously he had to sit out the year to redshirt, and fans really had no idea what they were going to get with him. Comes into this year, we all sat here and projected he'd be the starting 5-man. Unfortunately, he got hurt in preseason scrimmage, which probably would have been the case as the starting 5. Gets hurt, misses most of the year. When he comes back, by then it's so late in the year that it's hard to crack Bill Self's rotation late. And again, no offense to Cam, I haven't watched enough of his tape in KU time to really say how he looks defensively. But if you're not providing something defensively, the second you get in the game, your leash is short. So he never really got a chance, and of course had a couple more injuries to deal with throughout the season. So he's got 1 year left. I fully expect him to go to a team where he'll actually be able to plug in as a scoring threat in the post. And, there's a chance he could come back. I'd put a small chance on all these guys to come back. If you guys don't understand how the transfer portal works, they have a time period to announce their intent to transfer, and their name goes in the portal. If, though, by the end of the transfer portal season, they have not found a new team to join and their current team still has open scholarships, they can come back. And as from what I've looked at so far, I think Bobby has a decent chance of coming back. I think Zach Clements might have a decent chance of coming back, depending on where he gets. But Cam's probably gone. Hopefully he gets set up with the team because I'd like to see him have some success. And JB, I know you would for sure too. Zach Clements is the one that's kind of intriguing to me. He's built like the center type I've been asking for years. KU never gets the 6'11". I mean, I shouldn't say never because we got Udoka, but KU never gets a high-profile 6'11", 7-foot center that can score, that can shoot, and do those things offensively. Doak, it took him a couple years developing. Embiid figured it out in the second half of the season. David McCormack, similar but undersized, took him 3 years. So Zach was supposed to be that guy. And again, I think he is a good player. I think he's a tough fit for a Bill Self system because he struggled defensively. He's got slow feet, hasn't really quite learned how to use his athleticism to shift around and create space on the defensive side before he's sandwiched into them and drawn a foul. But we know he's capable of shooting. We know he's capable of scoring. But you've got a couple guys ahead of him. I mean, Uday clearly is the best option at the 5. Zuby was better defensively than Zach. So you've already got 2 guys ahead of you. And that's not including how many minutes KJ gets at the 5 again next year. So it's kind of the odd man out scenario. So unless they go to KJ at the 4, Uday at the 5, with the Zuby and Zach off the bench, I don't really see minutes for Zach on this team unless he's willing to continue waiting. And when you're 6'11" and capable of scoring like he is, someone's going to take you and make you a focal point of their offense. So again, hope he has that opportunity somewhere, but if he does come back, that guy's got to learn how to play defense if he's going to get some minutes. The 2 biggest question marks left are Kyle Cuff and MJ Rice. Let's talk about Kyle for a second because most fans know nothing about Kyle. Kyle Cuff, underrated recruit, I would say. Not a lot of people really knew much about him coming out of this class last year. KU had such a large incoming class last season that there weren't going to be minutes for him, so he was an easy redshirt candidate. But about 6'3", pretty lightweight, combo guard, can be the primary ball handler, can be a scoring threat from the 2 spot, can shoot pretty decently. He's really athletic. I think he's honestly one of the most athletic guys on the team. Doesn't have the jump ability, that Joe Yesfu has, but he's also 6'3", so he's got a little bit more size. He's a question mark for me. Coming into this year, he was expected to be in the rotation. He was one that when we were sitting here back last spring, we thought he's probably the 12th or 13th man fighting to get minutes. And I think there was a really good chance just with the way Bobby and Joe played that he could have easily stole the backup point guard minutes or that 2 spot next to DeJuan. So I think he's an interesting case to watch. He had to take a medical redshirt this year. He got hurt really early in the season. And by the time he was going to be healthy, there's no minutes there at the end of the season. So I think he's one to watch out for. And I think KU fans would actually like watching him play if he gets that opportunity. Then MJ Rice, the big one, and here's the one I want to kind of discuss with you guys because he did nothing this year. Very highly recruited, a lot of hype, a lot of athleticism. He kind of has that Wayne Selden type, 6'5", 215, 220. Really athletic, not a great shooter, but can score. He was a scoring threat in high school. That's what he was. And he was a guy that flirted with overseas talk or the G League instead of coming to college. I'm surprised we haven't heard anything on him yet. I think the longer each day we go not hearing something is a good sign he probably stays or he's going to bounce and go to the G League. He's a guy that, again, had a lot of unfortunate luck this year, weird injuries. We're not going to get into how many of them are real or not. But he's had some odd injuries, oblique strains, calf strains, hamstring strains, stomach aches, all sorts of stuff. So he just never got a chance. But when he was in there, you could see he was overmatched defensively. But he's one I hope comes back because I think actually his size and athleticism would fill in nicely at the 2 spot this year or the 3 spot because we're losing a lot of athleticism on the wing. So he's one that I hope comes back and I hope can kind of figure it out. What do you guys think about MJ? Do you want to see him back? Does he fit in this roster? Or is it, hey, this didn't work, let's just go try something else?
Yeah, I like MJ. I don't know if I'm in the minority here, but I really like MJ. I love the comparison to Wayne Selden. We threw that around, as you said, when we were predicting how the roster would look at the beginning of the season. I've never been on a basketball court, so I can't speak to the effect that injuries have on you in the middle of the season. I would imagine it takes a lot of the mojo out of me, really. I think now I'm recovering from a broken femur, and I'm really cautious with every single movement I make as I'm walking around my house. So I can only imagine that it's roughly the same. So I kind of want to give MJ the benefit of the doubt. He is big, and that's what I really like. I'm so sick and tired of this team being so undersized. I just want to be taller than everybody. I really want to be taller, and I think MJ, if I have a crazy prediction, and I hope this isn't clipped and then used against me, but I really think MJ has the possibility to make a KJ-esque jump in his next year if given the opportunity. Because certainly we have a whole lot of recruiting to do. Bill Self is going to hit the transfer portal. He's going to be out there making calls, making visits, and it's going to be fun. I do like the freshmen that we have coming in, but I'm looking at the roster and I'm still seeing, wow, we're losing 3 starters, and these 3 starters were so important. Of course, DeJuan is coming back is a blessing, and the fact that he'll likely be back another year after that is a blessing. Having KJ back is a blessing, but he's also small. So the way that the roster could look next year, I mean, heck, right now, if you look at what we have right now, if we need to just start our best guys, we're looking at a starting rotation of DeJuan at the 1, KJ at the 4, and Ernest at the 5, which we're not sure if that would even work. I'm of the belief that if that was to work, KJ absolutely has to develop a jumper. So we got to see that coming. And it would be a little bit more of a traditional lineup where we have 2 bigs and 3 guards. We've been playing with 4 guards so long. The other 2 spots would probably be MJ and maybe one of our incoming freshmen, likely Marco, maybe even Marcus Adams. I'm not sure between those 2 which one is really going to end up being the better of the 2. With Marcus Adams reclassifying to 2023, I'd have to take a closer look at how those guys look next to each other. But that's what we'd have, and we'd be big. I'd like that. I think we would be big 1 through 3. And if we have 2 traditional bigs, maybe our rebounding gets a lot better. But it'd be a whole other conversation to talk about that lineup. But I do think if given the opportunity, MJ can really have a big jump.
Spencer, how do you feel MJ mixes into this offseason?
Yeah, I think I kind of feel bad for MJ because he was just out of rhythm the entire season. When you're constantly injured, constantly hurt, you're out of the rotation, you're in the rotation. It's really hard to go in there and just pick up like you never left. And so, and if that's on offense and defense, defensively, I mean, obviously wasn't great, missed a lot of assignments, kind of looked lost a little bit sometimes. But again, it's kind of hard when you're kind of stiff and haven't played a whole lot to just hop in there and just automatically know, okay, this is my assignment. This is the schemes we're going with. And on offense, I mean, he's definitely a guy that can score, but he almost looked kind of afraid to go out and get his own shots. So I think Bill this offseason, if he's going to pitch to MJ to stay, he's got to say, hey, you have your game. You can go out there and play it. I don't want you to worry about just trying to completely change who you are as a player to try to fit a system. He's got to give him some freedom a little bit. And that hasn't been Bill's strong suit in the past, but I hope he can kind of make an adjustment and say, I have this really good player that has potential offensively to be really good. Let me give him a little bit of leash and not just yank him out if he takes one bad shot or misses one assignment on defense. But I think 90% of the issues we saw from him this season are going to be solved with just consistent playing time. If he's out there getting minutes, I think he had a game this year, was early on, week non-conference opponent. I think he had a game where he dropped 17, 18 points.
Yeah, he had 18,
like
22.
And he looks great. He looks good. I think if he can look like that pretty consistently if he just gets the opportunity. So I really hope he stays. He's a big body, really physical, good athlete. His jumper is going to improve at some point. So I think, that's not something to worry about. But out of everyone that has the potential to go to the transfer portal, I hope he stays because I think he could do a lot of damage next year.
Yeah, MJ for me, I think it's kind of odd to say it this way. I think a benefit to his situation for this offseason is one of how good of a coach Bill Self is. Bill Self is the best coach in college basketball. I don't think there's any question about that. But what that also means is he's one of the toughest coaches in college basketball. And we see it. If you go in there and you make a mistake in the first 10 seconds shot, you're back on the bench. So just like you said, MJ never really got a chance. His development was already slow behind, his time on the floor. He didn't really get a chance to build any chemistry with his teammates. So when he got out there, yeah, he kind of looked like a deer in the headlights. The game was a little quick, and there's only like for him to make those mistakes, that has to happen early in non-conference play. Once you're in a conference play, Coach Self does not allow for those mistakes to carry you into the rest of the year. So he just didn't get that chance early on because he missed so much of the season early on. He never had that opportunity to get enough of those minutes to do anything. But I think I can't speak for MJ, obviously. I would like to think if he was sitting here right now, we were asking him about how he felt this year. I kind of feel like he would say, hey, it was a tough year for me, but I'm learning a lot about how the game is different. And I respect the heck out of my coach for being so tough on me. There was a game back over Christmas break that a couple guys were out. I think MJ was also out at that same time, had just come back and then just left again. And actually, Norm Roberts was on post game talking about MJ because David Lawrence was asking, fans haven't really seen a lot of him. What can you tell us is going on behind the scenes? Because there's a lot of excitement for him. And then he talked to MJ too, and MJ was like, hey, I'm learning a lot. I've got a lot. He's like, clearly I have a lot I need to work on and a lot to learn. And Roberts was saying, hey, this kid's incredible. He's been willing to learn and accepting the fact that there's more to learn. And so he's like, hey, we're just taking it day by day, slowly get better. So I think that does give me some optimism heading into the offseason that now he gets a full offseason program with KU. There's not as many guys ahead of him on the roster to push for because we need a scoring threat next year. Like right now, we have no scoring threat with this current construction. And you're not going to rely on Elmarco Jackson and Marcus Adams for your scoring threat. That's just not a typical Bill Self look. And DeJuan's not going to magically go from 6-7 points a night to 15, 18 while playing the same game that he also plays. So I think MJ there has the biggest opportunity. So as we're talking about the transfer portal, here's what we know for sure is coming in. You got KJ, DeJuan, and Zuby. Those are the three for sures. In this scenario, we're going to assume MJ Rice is back. So there's four. And let's say Kyle Cuff comes back. So you got five guys right there. Then you've got incoming freshman Elmarco Jackson, who's probably the highest potentially out of this group. A 6'3" combo guard who can score pretty quick, could play the 1 or the 2. You've got Jamari McDowell, probably going to be a redshirt candidate next year, but a 6'3" combo guard too who can shoot. Then you've got Chris Johnson, another kind of combo guard. A lot of combo guards in this class, which I'm actually okay with because they're not undersized. They're not 5'11", 6 foot. These are 6'1", 6'2", 6'3" guards. So Chris Johnson's going to be a mix there. So you got 8 guys right there. Depending on how KU wants to handle the NCAA stuff, between this upcoming year and the following year, they have to lose 2 scholarships. So maybe instead of having 13 scholarship players this year, they go down to 11 or 12 or push one of them to next year. So we're at 8. So we're going to assume 5 more guys are coming. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot to say throw Marcus Adams in there. Wow, he's probably the other most gifted guy in this class, and I didn't add him. Marcus Adams is definitely getting playing time this year, whether it's the 3 or the 4, and we'll get into that. So you've got 9 guys right there. You need 3 to 4. So I'm pulling up the transfer portal right now. My opinion, I think we need – I'm not as in on needing a big man or a better 4-man. I think we actually have enough pieces there unless we find a guy that's just a strong scorer. What I'm looking at personally is a high-quality wing player that can shoot and score from the field. So I'm pulling this up. I want to give you guys a couple names here to see what you think. For me, the first guy that I'm looking at that I would love the most is Khalif Battle. He's a shooting guard from Temple. Averaged 18 a game, 3.6 rebounds, 1.8 assists, but he's a bigger guard, can score at all 3 levels, shot decently from 3, not tremendous. And he was doing this coming off of the bench for most of the year, and he still led their team in scoring. He had 13 times last year where he scored more than 20 points in the 27 games he played, so that's pretty impressive there. And he's going to be an easy bucket getter wherever he goes. And right now, Kansas is on his list of teams that have reached out to him, so he's number one for me. And when I say I want something like him too, that 6'4", 6'5" combo guard who can shoot, can kind of be a focal point that's maybe an upperclassman, just in case MJ doesn't take that jump that we're hoping he does, or if he doesn't come back. Have you guys familiar at all with Khalif Battle? Not really. Okay, so I won't go too much into him because I haven't watched a whole lot of tape on him. But I want each of you guys to give me a name in the transfer portal that you're seeing that you think would actually make a big impact on this team for us to go after. Because I got a couple more I'll throw out there. I want to see if you guys have anybody first.
Who's that guy from Arizona?
Prisa, I think.
Yes.
I think he's already going to Xavier, I think.
Is that already decided?
I'm not sure. I think that's where he's leaning
up right now.
Because he would be amazing.
Yeah, I agree.
I
don't know if he would actually fit well. He's a terrible shooter.
Is he?
Yeah, he's not a good shooter.
Great. Okay. I take that back. I just want a good shooter. My thing is I kind of just want
He hasn't landed anywhere yet. But he's looking at West Virginia and Illinois right now too.
I don't know, it's tough. I think regardless, I do agree with your assessment of like we need a good combo guard that can shoot. We definitely need that. We definitely need some defense too. It would be fantastic if Kevin McCullough just decided, you know what, I'm going to come back. But the senior speeches coming from Kevin and from Jay Will, I don't see them coming back. So we got to get another Kevin McCullough type of player. He was extremely important to the team. We lost him and then got blown out by Texas. So it's I would be looking at guys like that, but I'd have to brush up on actual names in the portal.
Spencer, do you have any names?
There's a couple guys that I think could come in and make somewhat of a difference. But I would say one guy that I was looking at was Reese Dixon Waters out of USC. He's a 6'5" shooting guard, good size. I think he could come in and that I would like to see two things. I'd like to see shooting. I'd like to see big guards. I want us to get some size in the guard position, because if we're going to have an undersized, if we're going to play KJ at the 5, we kind of saw it the last 2 years. The guys like Jalen and Christian, who are fantastic rebounders for being wings and guard
and could play
combos.
2 ways. Could play defensively enough at the 3 and 4 spot.
Exactly. So I'd like to get some size in the guard and wing position. And we need spacing, because if we go out there and let's say MJ does take a big leap and he's the 3 guy, Dewan's at the point and he's, he can shoot, but it's not going to be a strong shoot. Unknown at the shooting guard, whoever that's going to be, if it's El Marco, whatever the case may be. If it's going to be a freshman, again, translation between high school and college shooting is going to be a little bit of an adjustment. We have MJ, and we have KJ, and we have either Zuby or Ernest. We thought spacing this year was bad. We at least had Grady to space it out. So we get there next year with nobody being an above 35% shooter. Teams are just going to load the paint. Nobody's going to be able to drive. Nobody's going to be able to slash. And if we dump it down to a big, let's say Ernest and Zuby pick up their post game, well, great. The defense is going to collapse because they're not worried about it getting kicked out. So shooting is definitely, I think, the must for us. And yeah, I mean, Clements could have slid in and done that, but again, if we lose defense, it doesn't really matter. So, size in the guard position and shooting is what I'm looking for.
So let me give you guys a couple other names. This one there hasn't been a lot of talk on yet. It's only been, I think, mentioned by some local guys. But Stanford senior forward Spencer Jones, he's 6'7", 225. Originally, he's from Kansas City, hometown here in Kansas City, played at Bishop Miege. He threw his name in the transfer portal, and I've already heard rumblings of his desire to want to come back to Kansas and play. I don't know if that is KU, K-State. I don't know if there's been any conversations there. But obviously with Jared Haas being their head coach out there, there's that KU connection. And this last year, he averaged 14 a game, shooting about 43% from three, which is pretty solid there. I was looking at his 3-point attempts. He went 72 for 185 from the three. So not too bad there. Can score, has got some decent size. I think he'd be a good fit. Okay-ish rebounder for his size. I don't know how well he really holds up defensively. He had 37 steals, 29 blocks, so still provides something there. I think he'd be an interesting fit. Another guy that I looked at, his name's Nicholas Timberlake from Towson. He's about a 6'4" shooting guard, averaged close to 18 a game last year, 41.5% from three, which is pretty solid there. So I think he'd be a good fit. And then another guy, mostly just because of the name. And as soon as I saw this on the list, I had to pause and go, dang, I'm only 28, but I feel incredibly old seeing this. And that is Jameer Nelson Jr. It doesn't even seem like it was that long ago that Jameer Nelson and Delonte West were rolling through the tournament at St. Joe, but it's been almost 20 years. But yeah, Jameer Nelson Jr. is also in the transfer portal. Had an amazing season, albeit at Delaware. Averaged 20 a game. He would be still a somewhat undersized guard, but I think he could easily plug in with DeJuan because DeJuan's got the length defensively. And he's probably one of the best scorers in the transfer portal right now. So I think that one would be fantastic. He's got basketball in his blood, so what could go wrong there? As far as some bigger guys I was looking at, I don't expect this to happen because it's in the conference. But the guy out of Texas Tech, Fardaws, however you say his last name, Imik, he gave KU a lot of fits this year in the 2 games we played. He averages 12 a game, 8 rebounds. He'd be good size. But honestly, I don't know the likelihood of us getting another big man. I think they're going to fall on just development. And then there's a guy out of Georgia, Cario Oquendo. He's a good wing player, averages 13 a game, pretty solid defensively. So there's a couple guys out there, and I'm sure there's going to be plenty more that'll add to the portal coming in the next couple of days. They have a few weeks to do all that. There's a guard out of Illinois, Sky Clark, who didn't have a great year this year because he was recovering from ACL surgery, but still athletic, decent size, can score off the ball. Play alongside another point guard. So there's a lot of names out there, a lot of things that we'll see. And I'm sure like Bill Self's probably going to bring in 2 or 3. My biggest question is, how are these freshmen going to look? If right now, based on the roster we had, if I had to throw my guess out there, assuming MJ stays, what I would do is I'd go DeJuan at the 1, MJ at the 2, Marcus Adams at the 3, KJ at the 4, Ernest Uday at the 5. And I think that is a likely scenario, but I could also see KJ starting at the 5, Marcus Adams at the 4, transfer portal at the 3, Uday coming off the bench as the 5. But in bigger games and when we need a closing lineup, I could easily see Uday and KJ being out there defensively. Biggest question mark for me this entire offseason is, how much confidence do we have that KJ will develop somewhat of a perimeter game, even if it's a mid-range jumper, to where he can spread the floor just enough to keep the defense honest? Because if he's in there with no jumper, you can just clog the paint, and then there's no one to spread the ball to. So I think he's kind of the biggest question mark as far as how the rest of the roster is going to be constructed. So kind of with what we've seen, let's give an early, and we'll do another episode later as we know more details on the team. With the current construction of what we have, with what we know for sure, assuming we don't get some big transfer portal guys, how you guys feel about this roster heading into the offseason? And who do you think is going to be the guys that kind of fill in those spots in rotation minutes?
I think I'm a little terrified. I think we lose a lot. But I'm thinking our freshman class is going to be a little bit better than this year's freshman class in the sense that we can see some early production from them. Typically, Bill Self teams don't have really good impact freshmen unless they're a guy like Grady Dick or Andrew Wiggins, right? But we can definitely have a big impact from these guys. I think Marcus Adams reclassifying, it was a big wish at first, and it was short lived because it became a reality like a day after. And it's really exciting to see him coming through. As far as KJ developing a jumper, I don't really see it. I want to see it, but I don't really see it happening. I liked his runner game. His runner and floaters were really good. He has the potential to develop that jumper, but I would much rather see him playing to his strengths and continuing to barrel toward the rim and catch lobs from Dewan. I can easily see us starting him at the 5 again next year and having Ernest be the easy, without question, 6-man, and might even be splitting a good amount of minutes with KJ at the 5 and really just running through those guys. And then having four wing players and or guards around him. Because I think at the end of the day, we have to play to the probability, and I just don't see the probability coming back in our favor of KJ developing that jumper. And there is absolutely no question in my mind. KJ will start, whether it's at the 4 or at the 5. He will start next year. Ernest is not going to overtake him. And there are some people that believe that he will, and that's just not correct in my opinion. I think Bill Self is really loyal to his starters. But he's a smart man, and KJ has played so well. He deserves to start the rest of his career
it's
at
more
Kansas.
likely we see a lot of
that's exactly
together.
Oh yeah, and I think next year is going to look a lot different because that I do think Ernest earned some big minutes, so he'll be a big factor next year. But I could see a starting rotation, at least with what we have now, of KJ at the 5 and starting maybe both Marcus Adams and El Marco, and then MJ and Dewan. We could see that, and I'm not sure how well we would do, but I would say to win the Big 12, maybe. Bill Self is a great coach. I think it can get done, but I could also see us getting like 3rd place in the Big 12. I could see us being a 2 seed at best in the tournament. My confidence is definitely lower than it was this year.
Yeah, I think, we can try to rely on KJ becoming, a legitimate stretch 4 next year. But I think there's 2 different ways you can kind of play it. And I do think his role is going to be kind of how we define the roster as a whole, because either, he can learn how to become at least a decent jump shooter, 12 to 15 feet, get a consistent one, or he can become a better passer. And then we can do one of 2 things. One, we can play him and Ernest, so go a little bit bigger. Just play KJ at the elbows and run the offense through him. He can be a bit of a zone buster kind of guy. So get it to him on the elbow, allow some movement off the ball, allow cuts. You're not going to clog the lane if Ernest is going to be on the block. I think he's such a versatile player that kind of gives us some options. So we can either go big, play him with both, allow him to kind of run the offense kind of like Draymond Green does with the Warriors. If he can become a good playmaker out of that mid-post area, I think that works. Alternatively, put him at the 5 and then just go, your traditional 4-guard spacing heavy lineup. The question with that is, though, if we're not going to have any rebounding wings or guards, then we're going to get outboarded every single time. So I think we're going to see a lot of different starting lineups. I think Bill's going to experiment a lot at the beginning of the year. So he's going to say, okay, let's try this small ball lineup and see what happens. Are we going to compete defensively? Are we going to compete on the boards? That doesn't work. Let's go with a slightly bigger lineup. Let's go with Uday. Let's go with KJ at the 4, and let's get some size. I mean, playing MJ at the 2 would be fantastic because that means our 2 guys, 6'5", and big bodies. So that's going to give us size. It just depends how well he can shoot. So he's got a lot of options. I think we're not going to see a definitive starting lineup until probably close to the end of non-conference play. So, I like that we have options. And I think if we're going to rely on KJ's improvement, it doesn't have to be strictly from his jumper. See how much he improves as a playmaker. See if he can grab a board and go, 90 feet to the other basket. Because I think if he can do those two things and him and DeJuan can kind of run the offense between each other, I think that's fantastic. And I think that's going to be a really tough team to try to plan against, because it's not going to be traditional dump the ball into a big guy and allow the defense to collapse. It's not going to be traditional, let's spread out four guys and just run a bunch of motions on the wings. I think if we have a guy that can kind of throw a wrench into people's defensive schemes, then that could work. But yeah, aside from KJ and DeJuan, and in my opinion, I think Uday will start at the 5. I think that's where he's going to go personally. I think it's going to be Uday at the 5, KJ at the 4. Either El Marco or Marcus Adams, depending on what we want to do, and then MJ and DeJuan. I think that's the most likely lineup, because I think we saw flashes from Uday, and if he can just stop getting silly ticky-tack fouls, he becomes a lob threat, and he becomes a guy that can legitimately develop into a dominant big. But I think we just got a lot of options, so it just depends on how Bill wants to play it.
I think the name that a lot of KU fans, you need to start doing a little bit of more personal research on to get excited about is El Marco Jackson. He could be an X factor of this team next year. He's very versatile. Could play at the 1 or the 2 in the starting lineup, come off the bench. He's going to bring a lot of energy. He plays the game with a lot of passion and excitement, gets up and down the court quick, aggressive physically on offense, big athlete. So I think he's a name everyone should watch. But I do like what you guys have said. I think KU does have options going in the offseason. Anytime you lose 7 players, it feels overwhelming. And 7 players is half of a roster. And that's basically an entire Bill Self roster, considering how he dwindles down the rotation by the end of the season. There's going to be a lot of moving pieces, and I'm sure over the next couple of days and weeks we'll know more of what those pieces are going to look like as we wait news for guys like MJ, Kyle Cuff, and any of the transfer portals. So Jayhawk fans, stay tuned. Don't worry too much yet. It's Bill Self. He's never let us down. Even the years that have been bad years for us, as we've talked before, still end up in a 4 or 5 seed, which is like the sky is falling for Kansas, which is still way better than a lot of other schools. So have hope. Self's going to figure this out. They have a lot of open roster spots now, and we'll know more in the few weeks. So until then, keep up with the information. As we hear things, we'll do more episodes kind of talking about the roster. We'll do our typical, end of the after March Madness is over and transfer portals winding down. We'll do our typical big preseason outlook in April, and of course do more throughout the summer as the roster gets finalized. So until then, guys, stay tuned. Thanks for listening to us today. Again, I will post this hopefully here later today. If you're watching us on YouTube, thank you. Please hit that subscribe button. Still slowly growing on YouTube as we're starting to do some more video-based stuff. If you listen on Spotify, don't forget to rate the podcast. Give us all 5s. That would be preferable. If you don't think we're all 5s, that's fine. I understand. But we'd like to see that. And don't forget to subscribe to us on Twitter at KCSAPod. We're getting a little bit more active there as we're sharing information and things that come. So, guys, thanks for joining me again today. And as always, rock chalk.
Rock chalk.